Cool. Welcome everyone to another episode of the OpenJS Foundation's Cross-Project Council meeting. Today is the 22nd of June. Another lovely day in the year 2021. Yeah, thanks for joining. Don't forget to put yourself in the doc. We have a light agenda with an expectation that we may spend some time talking about the community fund, which is one of the items on our agenda as well. Oh, I see Michael Dawson.
Yeah, I made this typo and I'm like, no, I'm renaming him this in the minutes. So
I love it. Nice. Cool. Yeah.
I typed it wrong, but I hadn't renamed myself.
Rory, could you add the link to the notes in the chat again?
Yes.
Please.
Great. Cool. So before we get into the agenda items, do we have any announcements?
I think a couple of fun ones. One being that this Friday is our board meeting. That's fun. That sounds fun, doesn't it?
Always.
And so there's also a public session for that. So subscribe to the calendar to put those on your calendar, so you can get the links to YouTube and all that fun stuff. So that's happening. I feel like, was there something else? Oh, this was kind of fun. This is sort of tangentially related, but today is the ECMA General Assembly meeting, and where they actually do the formal vote process to approve final draft specifications and technical recommendations. And it was really cool because this morning there were 7 documents to approve, 5 of which were JS related. The 2 ECMA 262 and 402 specs, and then also 3 documents out of the brand new TC53, which is JavaScript on embedded devices. That's their first set of formally approved docs, and it's just like super rad to see. I know there's several people in this community that were involved with the TC53. So congrats to all of the JavaScripters who have contributed to these docs and get to have, that little feather in their cap today. So
that's great. That's exciting. Very cool. Great. The next thing here is board meeting updates, but with the meeting happening on Friday, I assume there's nothing there, but is there anything that we need to take to the board or anything like that?
I'm not aware of anything off the top of my head that there is. So if there is, let us know.
Cool beans. Great. So I suspect we will crush this agenda right quickly. The first item, sorry?
One quick announcement. I don't know if we have people who are listening or watching in China, but there is the Linux Foundation's hosting an event in China, July 7th through 9th, and I will be speaking along with a number of other LF folks. So I'll put it here. Obviously virtual for those of us who are not in Shanghai or Shenzhen, but excited to share the JavaScript news there.
Cool.
All those cool project updates.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear how it goes.
Yeah.
And that's something we can all watch as well.
That is a good question. I believe so.
Okay.
I will figure out how that can happen.
Cool.
Cool.
Excellent. Thank you, Robin.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. So the the first item is reminders for long-term events. I was just scrolling through the comments here. I don't think there's really much to talk about here. I'm hoping that at some point I might be able to work on some sort of script that we can GitHub action that we can lean on for, timely items, whatever they may be. But I don't have any updates, and I don't know. Feel free to speak up if you have anything to add to this agenda item. Otherwise, no update this week. I'm going to jump to the last one. In fact, I will, in the doc, move it up. Not that there's much to talk about here either. I assume there's no DCO CLA updates here as well.
Yeah, apologies. Brian couldn't make it. He's at his grandma's 95th birthday
Oh, wow.
celebration today. So happy birthday, Grandma.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Happy birthday, Grandma
We
Warner.
forgot that announcement. I know, it's a good one.
Yeah.
But I don't believe he has an update
Okay.
based on our team meeting. Yeah.
Unrelated, on social media a week or two ago, I saw an image of a giant hydrangea, and it was 100-year-old hydrangea, and next to it was the woman who planted it, and it was like, dwarfed her, but it was just amazing that that's a real thing.
I'm gonna look that up. That's cool.
Yeah.
I can't keep a cactus alive for like 2 minutes.
Anyway, all right, cool. So on to our last agenda item, which is the community fund. This is issue 756, create proposals for the community fund. There is a helpful comment there from Jory from a week ago, because we talked about this in our last working session. But if we want to use the remainder of our time to kind of get everybody up to speed and maybe discuss a little bit further, I would turn the microphone over to Jory to give us a summary, and we can go from there. What do you think, Jory?
I think I should. I mean, I think it's sort of one of the things we wanted to do last time, or after the working session, because we didn't have like a huge turnout for the working session. We did take some notes. Those are linked in issue 756 to a HackMD. And for the parties that were available, we really kind of landed on the sense that, primarily the community fund should target specific programs that we've already kind of more or less know these are things that are important to us. Funding travel, funding scholarships for certain things, like some sort of perhaps thanks or gratitude, appreciation program of some sort. Standards participation was another one where we're already supporting some people in the community to go serve as invited experts. So these are programs that we think that we've already got a fair amount of shared understanding, but we need to kind of add a few more details around so people can kind of understand the requirements, the constraints, like what it means to participate in that program, so that it's really clear and it makes approval for for participation in that program faster. That was one thing that we talked about wanting to be able to do, which is move more promptly on these things that have those clear boundaries, so people aren't kind of in limbo for several weeks wondering if they're going to get to go to that conference because there's not an answer yet. We also talked about how to figure out like whether and how project maintainers could request funds for something that doesn't necessarily fit within those existing programs, right? So it's that something that may feel a little bit more ad hoc, and we didn't want to disclude that from happening because that's a valuable feedback mechanism for us as a foundation to say, oh, this is something that perhaps a couple of maintainers would like to see that helps them, that benefits their projects. So maybe this could be developed into a program later. And so being able to evaluate and accept requests for something that's not part of a preset package would be great. But we want to make sure that those requests have a clear rubric for evaluation, and that maintainers have support from CPC representatives to scope and define and describe the request and the purpose and that kind of thing clearly, so everybody's on the same page. We talked about the fact that probably there should be some kind of cap. You know, 60K is a wonderful budget, but if there's no sort of guidelines, it could go really quickly. So we want to make sure that, you know, there's a sort of an upper bound, especially given that we want to see that the benefit, the financial benefit, goes to an individual, but the projects that that individual is affiliated with also see some kind of benefit. And we had a couple of examples in our notes document that kind of describe that, and I can go through some of those if you're interested. And then last but not least, we, and Michael really helped kind of paint this too for me. We should make sure that that we're mindful of this sort of gray line between the community fund being a source of direct support for the projects versus being a fund that like actually helps individuals who are trying to get like further involved with our projects. So, you know, there's certain things that we imagined, for example, you know, a code and learn type of activity or a survey or something where there is a lot of mutual benefit to support a person participating in that, but also it's kind of a program to support the project too. And there's a line where the group felt like, okay, some of these programs should be separately accounted for in the budget as outside of the community fund versus what's accounted for inside the community fund. So that briefly, hopefully captures the wide-ranging conversation that we had last Tuesday. And we felt good about this direction for shaping proposals and things like that, but wanted to bring it back to the CPC for broader discussion and make sure that we're not missing something, so we can kind of roll forward from here. Let me ask Michael if I'm missing anything, because you were definitely.
Yeah, no, I think that, you know, the couple of things just I might comment on is like the going to an individual was kind of one way where it's like that naturally limits the amount of an ask. Like it's not like, hey, I can ask for 20,000 to run a big survey or to run a big event for my project. It's more like individuals who can't get to those events on their own could apply and get support to get there. But, you know, that's like naturally capped at 1,000 or 2,000 or something like that in terms of individual asks. That was kind of one of the things that we discussed. And then the line of the project funding was, you know, again, it's kind of like we don't necessarily want projects to be using this to say I need hardware or I need something for my project. You know, the direct project support. You know, otherwise you could quickly use up the fund because it's not that big, and that was kind of the other one that we talked about.
So I guess the ask today is really to check in with the group here, noting, of course, it's another kind of small group, so we'll probably want to bring this back or prompt maybe something async in chat to discuss, like, is this direction one that feels good for our communities? This certainly, there were reps from other projects, Node, AMP, Electron, etc., on the call for the working meeting, but you know, want to make kind of sure that this is helpful directionality for the project. And I'm going to promote Jordan.
Oh.
So
Sarah?
Yeah, this seems great and kind of in line with what we've been talking about. For the one question I had was about the the requirements are kind of the max amount that people could ask for, given with 60K a year, we probably want more than one or two initiatives to get funding. Have we put any thought into what that looks like and kind of how many initiatives we want to be able to fund per year?
That's a really good point, which we didn't discuss, but I think that would be a good, like for each of the identified programs, it would be nice to have a, you know, like travel. I think we've always discussed that in the past years where they were regular years, we spent 30,000 or something. So you could say that's kind of what we think for that. And like scholarships, you could pick some number that says like, this is the total we can use for that, right? And I think that would be very helpful.
Of course, this year's a little different because we're starting halfway in. So it will start again in January, right? So.
Yeah, do we foresee spending this budget this year? Given that we're kind of coming up with these, I mean, I don't know if this is an important question to answer, but we're coming up with these standards like over halfway through the year. People don't know about it. People aren't traveling. Do we foresee this being something that gets, maybe some of it is the answer? I don't know.
I'm not sure I'd worry too much about whether we do or don't. I'd be more like if we can get these things in place, it sets us up nicely for next year. And by like, I think if we kind of consider a normal year, right? Because if we go and spend all of the money on one area and then only have 1/10 of that next year, I'm not sure that helps. Although maybe it does. Maybe it says this year we're not traveling, so let's spend more on something else. I think coming up with the sort of normal year buckets along with what we might do this year would be good if we do that.
I also think that, you know, it is a pretty large pool of money. We do know that some requests are obviously decreased due to just the nature of 2020 and 2021. It may not be a hard upper bound that we want to put on each program this year, but rather just say on balance, we expect the percentage to look like this for 2021, 22, and then test that assumption and see if that was a good calculation and then kind of encode something more firm in the future. But for now, budgeting this CF down like further just feels a little premature, just because we don't know how many people are necessarily interested and able to take advantage of it as yet. And it may be that in like I said, 2022, it's like, let's go to Austin, Texas, you know, and see everybody for the conference. I will definitely be there.
I'd still be tempted to say, like for scholarships, right? If we get $60,000 in requests, are we going to do $60,000 in scholarships? Or do we want to, like, you know, do we want to say we want to be able to support the different things?
Maybe we start out with little experiments, right?
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, maybe instead of like a hard upper bound, there could be like, here's what we're thinking. If we hit this point, maybe we should talk about it.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Like we don't have to, you know, you could make the what we're thinking for each of them lower than the total, so that when you hit that, you say, let's do more of that, right? Or
if there's no interest the other way around, but yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It just kind of sets some sort of expectation so that people don't think, oh, we're going to do all of this and then we turn out not to be able to. It's better, I think, at least to be able to flip around and say, oh, well, actually we can do more of that than we thought, which is good.
Initially not allocating something like maybe, I don't know, quarter, third of the budget seems like a good way to have a lot of flexibility later on.
Yeah, agreed.
And Jory, I think, did you talk about process at all? I think with the community fund, it typically runs on GitHub and what the CPC members are. You think about having a smaller pool, perhaps?
We talked a little bit about process, though, I think at the working meeting, for the most part, the group sort of felt that the CPC's role immediately should just be establishing parameters of the program and letting some of those implementation details fall to the foundation staff to execute on. So if that's like, oh, this is how we're going to do Expensify or whatever, that's what we do. And you know, also we'll need to do some education and exploration on the LFX tool for how that transparently shows the ledger and that kind of stuff. So there's some of that stuff, but it seems like for the most part, the group was more interested in making sure it had the rules of the program kind of in place, and then the understanding of the accounting controls that would exist than say, you know, getting heavy into the process right away.
I think the process of execution is easy. I know Brian has thought through a lot of that, and I have too. It's just that if somebody, like if you have 20 people apply for 15 scholarships, then who decides? Like where does that decision process?
Right, and that's having that agreement up front. So it's, I think Jory was, at least I expressed like the mechanics of how you push the buttons and whatever and what tool you're using, I don't think is too much of a worry. It's more of like, yeah, what are the rules for application and who approves? And yeah, I guess, we haven't had to face that in the travel fund, but like if you can't approve them all, what do you end up doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that also may be something that can be variable depending on the program, right?
Definitely.
Yeah, where there might be more competition for certain, programs. So, I feel like that's a very important conversation, but it's also possibly one we should have as we're putting the parameters that we need around the program. I think the travel fund is one that's already pretty darned, understood by this community. And so we could largely pick it up and sort of test it out and put it in the current and just say, okay, now what needs to change to fit and go from there. But some of the other things like a thank you program where a maintainer may want to send, an appreciation token to someone. What does that look like? We've not done something like this way. That requires more thought and, possibly.
Yeah, like who's eligible to ask and
yeah.
limits. Like mostly those kinds of programs are like each project or person can only ask up to a certain limit per year, setting those kinds of parameters.
Yeah. So I think the next steps might be to take like the travel fund, for example, and just say, okay, if we were launching that with that today, where and how do we want to document this, and what are the operational steps there that the group wants to take, and then probably roll to others.
Yeah. Can I ask, since we don't have an OpenJS event in 2021, there are, of course, other third-party events and LF events, but we do have active requests for scholarships for the node certification. So I don't know if we were going to take an experiment on something that we could implement sooner rather than later. I would love to recommend that program, or to establish some sort of program. Or I don't know if we still need to like reach out to our projects who are not represented on this meeting too, to get some more ideas and feedback from the notes.
I think an FYI, it doesn't hurt. Like I'm not sure if it needs to delay anything, but like a summary that like Jory put together and says, we're we're thinking like typically we haven't spent all the dollars in the travel fund. So we're, thinking of expanding. Here are the things we're thinking of expanding it to. Let us know if you have any questions or comments. That's like in your weekly newsletter or whatever the email blast to the maintainers makes sense. And I guess that the one thing we might want to think about there is like, do we want to say anything along the lines of, for next year when travel's normal, we expect to support the same, like the question I'm foreseeing is like, well, what does that mean to the travel fund, right? Like if we have these other programs, does that mean we have less support for travel? So we might want to answer that up front to say, well, typically this is what we spent in past years, so we're going to reserve that amount for the travel fund. So it, should be able to support about the same as we have before. That might be worth saying if we want to or want to agree to that.
Makes sense.
I think that makes sense. I think another thing that I wonder about, and this is something that we should think more long-term about, is how do we measure the success of these programs? With travel, I think, okay, well, I personally would ideally want to support a maximum number of people possible. And so success is sort of like we helped 100 people get to experience like a community event in some way. And that's cool. Like that feels like a win. When I think about like a scholarship fund, it's like, yeah, like helping a maximum number of people do or achieve some goal, or for like the thank you program, helping just generally the community feel nicer and be more appreciative. And, that's something that is really important. So I don't know, that's maybe a longer term conversation to have, but I'd love for us to kind of think in those terms, because they're real people who really will hopefully get a lot out of this. And thinking about it that way is cool.
Yeah, and I think like you said, it's very program specific, right? Because I guess like the scholarships, it's probably not to get everybody a scholarship, right? It's to get the right people the scholarship. So it'll have to sort of fill in the qualification criteria and all those kinds of things per program.
So just to kind of recap, it sounds like one direct ask us this from this conversation is to send this around to all the project maintainers, and make sure there's not either a program or a perspective that we're kind of missing out on, and get their sense of like kind of what might be most exciting to them to get involved with first. I definitely hear Robin's like request to do something that will impact people today first, which is more scholarship than travel. So it sounds like maybe thinking through that program more, to get started, because we've never had a scholarship program before, would be another next step, if that's.
I mean, the travel program is documented and has a process. What's needed there is to basically update it to reflect the suggested mechanics, I think. So I don't know that needs any real discussion within the CPC, other than like looking at the final PR. There's Brian's proposal for how generally it would work. So we know what the tool is being proposed, and unless people are objecting to that, it would be like, okay, let's update it to use that, and somebody who knows that tool could probably do that separately. And until then, we could just we could use the existing process if we had to, right? So I guess that's a long way of saying it does seem like it doesn't need to be the one that the CPC needs to focus on to start.
Yeah, no, I thought, well, this is one where since everybody kind of gets the program, like it helps highlight the process changes because you're not questioning. But I think those are not the more exciting things anyway. So the exciting thing
hopefully
is the
not.
program. Yeah. Cool.
I can take an action and develop some or explore some guidelines for scholarships. I know that LF has done this and along other certifications, whether for Kubernetes or elsewhere, more on the DEI front, but just broadly. So I'll pull that and share.
Yeah, if there's an existing program,
yeah,
that sounds like a good thing to say. We're following this pattern that's existing.
In the past, I've seen, so one thing that can happen sometimes with these, as I'm sure that LF has seen, is that people get the scholarships and then just don't use them because it's easy to get. In the past, I've seen things like, essay is like a long word, but just, some type of long form application that just talks about like how it would benefit you and what your plans are. I've also seen things like if you don't take it, you have to pay for it, but that's awful, I think. But just something in which it would ensure that people that are going to use the scholarship are getting the scholarship, so that because if they don't, then other people that might use it may not get it because of the limited quantity.
Yeah, maybe
sure,
not
yeah.
You have to pay for it, but like if you don't use it within a month, you lose it or something. Like have it capped so that we can give it out to somebody else.
Idea. Yeah. It expires.
Yeah.
Well, and also if you apply for a scholarship and in the past you have let one go unused, then that would be considered. Maybe.
Yeah. There's usually people, once they decide to take a certification exam, for example, they usually do spend some time studying, and we have free training materials. So, but that's really good feedback.
Yeah, some time. Yeah, you got to give them enough time, and sure, just because you gave it to me today, I may be busy this month, so we should be accommodating on that. But
have you considered something of the sort where I might be speaking out of line, but I don't know the whole process. But where we let the people take the exam, all right, and then reimburse them for taking the exam. Like, let's say they did apply for the scholarship, and due to some circumstances, they lost it, in the first month. But then they were able to take it in the second month, and then they come back and say, hey, first month I was really busy or had some unforeseen circumstances that were out of my control. I know I lost it, but I still took it. I'm successful at it. Here's the proof. Is there a way you could reimburse me? I think that would give a little bit more incentive than just like being like, hey, you know what? You can't take it during the first month. We're gonna take it away, kind of thing. Because things happen, and I'm just feel that way it's a little bit like less pressure on the person taking the exam.
Well, playing devil's advocate here on that approach, there's two things that jumps out at me. One is that actually the administrative overhead of processing the reimbursements in that case may be kind of more trouble, especially when you're looking at something that's only a couple $100 really. But if you've got to keep track of like that a person has done this and they're now ready for being reimbursed or that kind of thing, it actually puts a lot more burden on staff, and that may not be actually kind of worth it. The second knock that I have against something like that is that there are a lot of people for whom that amount of money is significant, and even the ask of, hey, you spend the money up front and we'll give that back to you. Well, that might be rent money, or that might be,
They may not have a credit card.
Right. They may not have a
Mhm.
credit card. It may be, something that's geographically very difficult for them. So for large things, maybe it's worth it. But I would say for some of the stuff it's that we may be doing scholarships for, it's maybe not ultimately.
I think the other thing is, like, we're trying to set a timeline so that we can manage and give it out to other people. And we can't give out something which then may already be used by somebody else. So I think it's more, we've got to figure out the right balance. If a month is too short, we just got to figure out what the balance or timeline is, or something where it's like we check in after a month and say, well, are you still planning to take it, or something, so that we address the, well, we meant to give it out, but this person's not going to use it in the end, right? So we want to give it to somebody else before it's too late. But I'd address it on that side versus the, well, you can come back later, because that's sort of like then an unbounded liability that we take on, which I don't, in terms of managing the budget, I'm not sure we can do. I do like Sarah's point as well about, like, the application program, the how will this affect you, or something that's like, that says why it's needed versus making it. I guess it's the balance between like how hard it is to apply versus not, but it's a good point to figure out where the right balance is to get the right things happening.
Yeah, I think that's important too for something like a certification, because you want to set people up for success. They should have like a kind of intermediate level of Node.js specific experience. So that would sort of help put some guidelines out as well.
So not to like totally jump ahead or anything, but I'm going to for just a second. The next working session is next Tuesday. We had loosely preset a number of working session topics. So we had preset that the June 29 working meeting would be on tech strategy. But I wonder if instead we bump that to July 13 and take June 29 to flesh out together or to perhaps review, because somebody has taken the initiative to flesh out a stab at the scholarship program and kind of move from there.
Sounds reasonable to me. If that's one, like, it is time sensitive in the sense of, if we're at the end of the year, then, and this is a special year where there's like more need there versus others, it does make sense to try and get it going sooner than later, to me at least.
Yep.
I'll
Agreed.
flesh it out. I'll bring a draft.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anything more to discuss then, or?
Well, I guess not necessarily on this. I guess the next thing to discuss would be the working meeting, or the working meetings, plural. So in the agenda doc, I posted a link to the CPC 739, which is like the issue that has all of our meetings. I'm updating it right now to say that next week our working meeting will be on the scholarship program. And so that's that. There we go. But I guess the question for the group would be looking at the weeks ahead, what additional topics do we maybe want to make sure are hitting on the agenda, so that we can be prepared and get shit done. Sorry for cursing on the live stream.
I wonder if the tech strategy is going to take more than one session. It might be worth letting
Well, that's
that in
part
as a.
3. That's
I know it's part
more
3, but
things.
we don't have one yet. So
That's definitely that one's still live, and I think we made really good progress on that. If you go back and look at the notes, we really did have like this nice full list of kind of projects and categories and domains and that kind of thing. I think the next step there is to figure out what we want to do with that information, how we want to use it, and that will be a great discussion. So
yeah, I agree. We made great progress. That's why it's sort of like, but I'm just guessing it may take us more than just one more hour of discussion to get it to the finish line if we're looking for what to fill in. So it's kind of like if there's nothing else that's burning, that's something we can slot in.
I think that's good to have 2 sessions, because having a strategy without execution, isn't there a saying about that? Something like that. So
the new collab spaces is kind of a nice follow-on to that too, in the sense of that can drive perhaps where we think some good collaboration spaces make sense.
So then for the next 3, scholarship program next week, tech strategy, new collab spaces. And that gets us the rest of June and July. That's probably good, or do we want to maybe put some other ideas out there for working sessions now that we can reprioritize, obviously, if there's additional
I
things.
sort of want, just thinking about the existing collab space we have kind of around security issues, if that becomes sort of a working session with that core team, perhaps, you know, or if that's something we do as a part of the regular CPC agenda. But as their programs and proposals start to take shape, that might be something they want to bring back to the broader CPC.
Mhm.
Yeah, it does make sense, like especially as there's more than having like a good communication channel back and forth would be good to think about.
Yeah. And I was chatting with Darcy a little yesterday just about if there's any sort of big ask that they would want or need, something that would really benefit all the projects, something that would need additional funding, for example, kind of a wish list. So it might be great once they sort of get, you know, some of their, you know, priorities and plans worked out to kind of come back to a working session.
So I can add that here and just say with working session with the PKG security vuln working group. There we go. Oh, I'm down the wrong one. Okay, that sounds good. Any others?
Nope.
Yep. All right. Well, I think that's that then. I guess I should say I'm not going to be here for the next working meeting or the next regular meeting. I'm going to be on vacation. I will miss y'all.
Miss you too.
I hope you're going somewhere good.
Florida.
Enjoy.
Amelia
American
Island?
Florida. That's up. Yeah, yeah.
Are you going to Amelia Island?
I'll be south of there by about an hour. in St. Augustine. That's
I was gonna
where,
say St. Augustine. That's-
Yeah, that's nice too.
yeah, grandma and aunts and cousins and all live down there. So we're going to go see them.
Just as a question, are we intentionally still live on YouTube?
Oh, I don't care if people know where I am. Nobody cares.
Right.
Okay, cool. Well, that's it. That's all I think I have. That's interesting, including my travel plans.
I'd like to announce that Sarah's the first person and only person to like my t-shirt, but thank you. Cool. Well, we'll call it a wrap then.
Okay. See everybody
Thank you.
later.
Yep. Cheers.